Hello and welcome to this round 12 here at GP Turin. We have Lucas Bahon up against Alessandro Lippi. Teamer Energy on the right-hand side of our screen. That a relatively well-known quantity. On the other side, though, for Lucas, he's on a mono-white list with Eldrazi. That Ether Hub, the energy potentially useful, but the fact that the land can tap for colorless is potentially going to be handy too. We will get a chance to see if there's any use for additional colors in his list. I think that he's pretty straightforwardly mono-white, though.
Yeah, I don't see a use for other colored mana, and I don't see a use for energy. But it's like a, there we go, essentially a double land in that it produces colorless, which is definitely relevant for Matter Reshaper, but also produces white if you need it.
So the Matter Reshaper getting a cursory read there from Alessandro Lippi. It's seen a fair amount of play in Modern. It's a little bit of play in Standard. The 3/2 that when it dies replaces itself. Facing down a long tusk cub in the early turns of this game.
Yeah, but you know what's the perfect answer to Matter Reshaper? Magma Spray.
Magma Spray will do
Doesn't
it.
die. No
Straight
trigger.
to exile.
Yep.
That's what you need to do with these Eldrazi. Send them into exile. That's where we're safe from them.
This is a pretty aggressive draw from Lippi here.
Yeah, multiple cubs do work kind of well together. It means that you're consistently connecting. That means you're consistently growing your cubs. But Thought Knot Seer on turn 4, the 4/4 for 4 gets to see an Abrade and a Harness Lightning in Alessandro Lippi's hand, and he'll be taking one of those away.
Have to imagine it's gonna be the Harness Lightning, because that one can kill the Thought Knot Seer. Abrade still needs some help. And now Blowhorn seems to have stabilized somewhat, because Lippi is not left with all that much action. I guess he can attack with both of his cubs. And then if Blowhorn blocks, use the Abrade to deal with the Thought Knot Seer. Oh, that is such a good draw for Alessandro Lippi. Really the perfect card that he needed for the situation. Not only is it an answer for the Thought Knot Seer, but also he still has a Planeswalker on the table. This that's really the card you want to be seeing on top of your deck after the Thought Knot Seer.
Yeah, 4 damage, just the perfect amount to deal with Thought Knot Seer. Draws a card, of course, for killing the Thought Knot Seer, and gets to hit him with both of those cubs, going up to 5 energy. Each cub now representing a pretty sizable threat. Lucas Bahon passing with mana up. We can see that he has Archangel Avacyn in hand as one of his various options, as and when these cats come on the attack.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Lippi will also be aware of the presence of Archangel Avacyn, but this Chandra is doing some work.
Yeah, the Scarab God coming down. Now, the Scarab God, kind of a recent addition to Teamer Energy. One of the cards heralded as being important, especially in the mirror, letting you generate additional value. And we may see a zombie Thought Knot Seer at some point fairly soon from Alessandro Lippi.
Yep.
Archangel Avacyn coming down, effectively making attacks from Lippi not look like a great plan. And it will mean that Chandra, her number could easily be up here.
Magic players, if you are here and you have brought 2 friends, we have a tournament for you.
Blahon deliberating his options. We've mentioned it a few times, but the people who have chosen to go a little bit off book for this event, they get the advantage that they have a fair idea of what's going on against their opponents, whereas their opponents are kind of having to roll with the punches a little bit and fiddle out what they want to do in order to combat these new threats.
Yep. So let's see. Blowhorn is in a tough spot here. Obviously, he can attack Chandra with Archangel Avacyn. That can help to get at least one threat off the table. But yeah, to deal with the Scarab God in a long game, that is going to be pretty tough. He does have Stasis Snare and Cast Out in his deck, along with 1 copy of Declaration in Stone. But he might have a Declaration Stone in hand here, and that will definitely help. It's also somewhat appealing to play a Declaration in Stone on the Long Tusk Cup to snag 2 of them, but I think that the Scarab God is an even bigger threat at this stage in the game.
Let's see where the Declaration in Stone is going to get sent. There's enough good targets that it's pretty confident it's going to get played this turn one way or another. Does go for the Scarab God, get that one out of here.
Also interestingly, Lucas has Warping Whale, so he has an option to just make a token and sacrifice it, perhaps. Trigger Archangel Everson. Doesn't go for it.
Ronus the Indomitable. It looks like Lippy's particular build of Teamer Energy, relatively heavy on the gods of various descriptions. Kicking things off with a tune with Ether. Still more energy for those Long Tusk Cubs.
Yeah, and that is surely relevant, because now suddenly both Cubs can attack into the Archangel Everson.
Appreciating these unglued basics for Alessandro Lippi. Looking forward to see what the basics look like in the next, the third part of the trilogy, which has been a long time coming.
Well, only one Cub getting in though.
And we do see that Warping Whale. A few different modes on this one.
And I have to imagine it's creating the Eldrazi token here. There we go.
Yeah, if you're looking for a sacrificial body, there are a few better than these Eldrazi Scions. There we see Warping Well. You get to exile target creature with power 1, toughness or less. That one I've not seen come up too recently. The fact that it can counter sorceries, very potent indeed against the likes of Approach the Second Sun decks, various other decks in the format that really have to lean hard on key sorceries. If you've got Fumigates or so on going on, then be able to make sure that they don't pay off, working very well. And then finally this option, which is to put a colorless 1/1 Eldrazi Scion onto the battlefield, which can of course itself be sacrificed for mana. So an Abrade dealing with the token, meaning that at least this Long Tusk Cub gets to get stuck in, and we see Alessandro Lippi immediately pumping his Long Tusk Cub, getting a little bit more damage in, still leaving him with 5 energy, and here's Ronus the Indomitable. So actually, while Archangel Avacyn is going to turn into Avacyn the Purifier, the 3 damage to each other creature in play is not going to be too pressing in terms of what Lippi has on the battlefield, because look at the size of all of his creatures here.
Yep. And I think Blohan didn't play the Warping Will on his own turn in the hope of perhaps snagging an additional creature with the Archangel Everson transformation. But it has not really worked out for him that way. Lippi was able to assemble some additional energy to save his cubs. Added another big monster that is not affected by the Archangel Everson damage. So Lippi is pretty far ahead at this stage, and Blohan is potentially facing a lethal attack on the next turn.
Well, it's a lethal attack that's really going to be quite fiddly to deal with, because Ronus being able to give extra power and trample to creatures, it just generally makes blocking harder. But this Eldrazi Displacer may help quite a bit with that. Just being able to get creatures out of the way, shrink some of those Long Tusk Cubs back down again, all the while potentially doing some blocking as well. Avacyn the Purifier deciding that she maybe wants to hang back on defense, at least for now.
Yeah, it just has to.
Wow, Glorybringer coming down and big swings coming from Alessandro Lippi.
Well, the top of Lippi's deck after that Thought-Knot Seer has been definitely kind to him. Yeah, you pretty much have to take out the Glorybringer here, otherwise you just lose on the spot. But then Lippi can almost surely still attack with... well, if he attacks with everything, then one of his cubs, note that he doesn't have energy remaining left over, will be blocked by Archangel Everson, or Everson the Purifier, and taken down. Then Blohan needs to jump another creature, and this is actually a fine trade. Trading 1 Long Tusk Cub and 4 damage for an Eldrazi Displacer. That is surely something that Lippi is happy with. And now, I'm not sure there's much in Blohan's deck that he can find to get out of this here.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that depending on where you position your white deck, in principle there could be the likes of Fumigate and so on, but in practice we know that that's not really what Lucas Blahon's going for. And Alessandro Lippi, he'd already done the heavy lifting on previous turns. That was just kind of finishing off the job, and he goes a game up against Lucas Blahon here in round 12 of Grand Prix Turin. Let's have a look at how things are looking in general at GP Turin in terms of standings. Just the one lone player left undefeated, that being Andrea Sonzogni. 33 points. Blue-white approach. Bart Van Etten on mono-red. Jan Belmer, Giulio Baldrini, Dario Parazzoli, Marco Baccalari. We can see that the Italians have come out in force here to their local GP, but only 9 players even on 30 points. After that, things get a little bit sort of flatter. Lots of players here on 27 points. You can see Javier Dominguez in the mix there. You can see Alessandro Lippi, Federico Del Basso. And if we go on to the next page, we can see that actually the 27-pointers go pretty deep at this point. There's a lot of players who, with 9 wins right now, they know that if they can put together a good run for the rest of the day, they might be able to make something happen. Loic Labriand, he'd started today so strong, but ultimately it's been a bit of a rougher day for him today than it was yesterday. And as we scroll down a little bit further, we can actually see that on page 3 of this, the 27 pointers go all the way down to Marco Caravieri in 47th place. If you've not already got 9 wins, so 9-2 at this point, then it may well be that looking at a top 8 berth is going to be pretty much let's win out and hope.
Yeah, if you're 9-2 at this point, like the 2 players in our main match, you're surely still alive for the top 8. Perhaps if you have 8 wins and a draw, you might also still be able to make it if you win out from this point. But any lower than that, and you cannot really get your hopes up. But you can still finish in the prize money, end up with like a respectable finish at the end of the day, and there's still a lot of Magic to be played.
And
of course that's why they came as well.
It's early on in the season as well. Pro points picked up here mean that you're sort of putting yourself into a good position for the season if you're already in a position where pro points are a big deal. I mean, I know that there's a lot of players that are carefully planning out their year, figuring out which events they're going to be going to on that hunt for pro points, trying to get their level up so that they can get a bit more action at the Pro Tour.
Yep. So looking at the sideboards of the 2 players in our main match here, I have to say that the Chandra Torch of Defiance was the defining play in game 1 when Alessandro Lippi found it on top of his deck as an answer to the Taltnuts here. He has an additional copy in his sideboard, and I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to put that one in as well. He also has some heavy hitters like Confiscation Coup. Could be powerful to take over something like an Archangel Eversin, but I'm not sure how well that works out against an Eldrazi Displacer, because I believe that Eldrazi Displacer brings back the creature under the owner's control. And beyond that, there are not a whole lot of impressive cards in Lippi's deck that I think he would be super thrilled to bring in.
Now, Solemnity, how does that one work against Energy?
Now that's a nice one.
This is one that's in Lucas Blahon's sideboard and strikes me as potentially something that's going to be a big problem for Alessandro Lippi. Players can't get counters. One of the types of counters that players can, in principle, normally get is Energy. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. So if you've already got a Longtusk Cub in play and you've got some energy, even the energy that you've got there, you're not going to be able to put any counters on your creatures. So 3 copies of it in the sideboard for Lucas Blahon. It strikes me that it's exactly for this matchup. If he finds it and uses it, this could be kind of a problem for Alessandro Lippi.
Indeed. It reduces the effectiveness of almost half of his deck. So would be pretty powerful, but Blahon has started with a Matter Reshaper instead, and I don't spot a Solemnity in his hand yet at this point.
Double Matter Reshaper now. Rogue Refiner deciding it did not want to get in a fight with a Matter Reshaper. I can kind of understand that. It always feels a bit funny letting a Matter Reshaper die on your opponent's side of the board, because in principle that might mean that there's just something far worse coming for you.
Oh yeah. It's just not a favorable exchange. Lippy might have also have been hoping to be able to attack with the Rogue Refiner, to get into a race, exchange blows rather than trade, but when there's another Matter Reshaper back on blocking duty, Blohan is surely ahead in this game so far. He's ahead on board, he's ahead in the race of the 3-2 card advantage creatures, and also seems to have a reasonable amount of action in hand.
So Sky Sovereign in hand, which at some point you may be able to cast. It could be right now if there's a land. No, we've got a Thought-Knot Seer. Well, I mean, that's a perfectly fine thing to be casting for 4 mana. 2 Matter Reshapers down, and plenty of value for Lucas Blohan. He gets to get creature in play there, Thraben Inspector. Now there's the Thought-Knot Seer, and he sees 2 copies of Confiscation Coup, 2 copies of Harness Lightning, and a couple of lands. Bit of a tricky one here in terms of what to take.
Indeed. All of them can deal with Thought-Knot Seer in a way. Although I don't think you want to be playing Confiscation Coup on Thought-Knot Seer, because then you take control of it, eventually it dies, and Blohan would get to draw a card. That said, Confiscation Coup, given that Blohan had all these powerful 5-drops in hand, will ultimately, given that this game will likely go long, have more of an impact. And there were 2 Harness Lightning, so you can't really deprive Lippy the ability to use a Harness Lightning on this Thought-Knot Seer one way or another. And I think that the players are also checking, how does it work if I Confiscation Coup your Thought-Knot Seer, and then it dies, who draws the card? But I'm pretty sure that will not work out favorably for Lippy, and Harness Lightning seems to be the better answer in this regard.
Ronus the Indomitable, the follow-up for Alessandro Lippi, currently not able to attack or block. There are no creatures of power 4 or greater on Lippy's side of the board, but based on game 1, I don't think that's necessarily something that's going to trouble him for too terribly long.
So Blohan has not found a 5th land yet, it looks like. But he may have cast out as an answer to Ronas in case Lippy finds a creature to go with it.
Yeah, elected not to play the likes of either the Eldrazi Displacer or the Matter Reshaper in his hand, instead holding up mana for cast out.
Yeah, now if Lippy just passes the turn, do you really want to be playing cast out on the Ronas? It's not really doing much at this point, and indeed perhaps just drawing additional cards might be more valuable.
Well, there is the 5th land now, so a little cheeky hit with that Thraben Inspector, and now we're going to get the opportunity at a 5-drop. Let's see if Lucas Blohan pulls the trigger on something like Sky Sovereign.
Sky Sovereign seems a bit of an ambitious play to make here, because Blohan still knows that Lippy has Confiscation Coup in hand. You don't want to be playing your best threat only to say to your opponent, well, here, take control of it. Here you go, here's a present. Much better to play a less impactful card like the Matter Reshaper here. If Lippy wants to take control of it, that's fine, then he doesn't have the Confiscation Coup for the Sky Sovereign. And if Lippy does not want to play Confiscation Coup, then, well, Blohan can start attacking with the Matter Reshaper.
Well, Longtusk Cub, it looks like, may become a 4-4 pretty quickly here, just so that Ronus the Indomitable becomes active. Indeed.
Ooh.
Spatial Contortion in response to the second activation of the spend 2 energy to put a +1/+1 counter. That will be enough to make life a little bit awkward for Alessandro Lippi here.
Yeah, Lippy was hoping to be attacking with Ronas here. That's why he was beefing up his Longtusk Cub. He does have the option of playing Harness Lightning in response, just to get some energy, not even kill anything, so that he can keep his Longtusk Cub around and save it, and that might actually be worth it.
Yeah, these are the decision points that really separate games and leave you sort of thinking afterwards as to whether or not, like, what the right play was. Goes with the Harness Lightning, targeting Matter Reshaper. Spends 2 energy to kill the Reshaper. Lucas gets a land, but it also means there's 2 energy left for Lippy, so he does get to put the counters on the Longtusk Cub.
Yeah.
And here's the hit from Ronus.
That's a fine exchange for Lippy, but he wasn't thrilled about using his Harness Lightning on something like a Matter Reshaper, because ultimately the number of answers that Lippy has for Blohan's big threats is now dwindling. That Harness Lightning, Lippy may have been saving it for something like an Eldrazi Displacer or an Archangel Avacyn. Now he doesn't have that anymore.
Well, another Attune with Ether, meaning that the energy moving kind of nicely. I mean, I'm still thinking in parallel universe land of Lucas Blahon having the early Solemnity. How different this game would have looked.
Yeah, lots of those cards would not really have worked anymore. Harness Lightning, for instance.
Harness Lightning definitely
mana
not exciting.
do nothing.
But I mean, even the likes of your Long Tusk Cubs and your Attune with Ethers go from being the sort of fuel that keeps your deck running to relatively unexciting cards that you'd not be very excited to even play in Limited.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't mind playing a Grizzly Bear in Limited. 2/2, no ability for 2 mana. That's okay. In Standard, on the other hand, not so much. So I assume there's going to be cast out in the beginning of combat step to take out Long Tusk Cub, thereby essentially taking out 2 creatures at the same time. Now Ronas doesn't have a friend and cannot attack either.
Oh, it's a really sad story.
Yeah.
The god with no friends doesn't get to achieve very much. Lucas Blahon, plenty of lands in play, and his is a deck that has some handy little mana sinks in there. Thinking of the likes of the Eldrazi Displacer, that certainly doesn't mind having lots of mana available to activate it.
So Lucas still knows that Lippy has the Confiscation Coup, and actually like this, rather than adding Archangel Avacyn to the board, which is just gonna be taken over, just make some tokens with Spawning Bed, and get in with those. Like if Lippy really wants to spend the Confiscation Coup on one of them, or maybe on the Traben Inspector, that's gonna be fine. And there's also the Chefette Dunes, which perhaps in a couple turns from now could add a reasonable chunk of extra damage to this team of 1 power creatures.
And a Braid here being used, by the looks of it, on a Thraben Inspector.
So now Blahon may be thinking about using Archangel Avacyn to save it, but that doesn't seem particularly appealing. If you play Archangel Avacyn, you want to do it at the end of Lippy's turn, so that he doesn't have the sorcery speed Confiscation Coup as an answer.
Long Tusk Cub coming along, and here we see Ronus' ability to give +2 power in order to make sure that Ronus is then able to attack. Archangel Avacyn comes down and does not mind blocking the god. Everyone's indestructible. Yep. No harm, no foul.
And this might be lethal now. Lippy tapped out, so he didn't have mana for the Confiscation Coup. And together with the Chefette Dunes, perhaps an Archangel Avacyn transformation, I could see Blahon assemble 11 damage here.
Chefette Dunes. It's been chilling out in the land area for a large proportion of this game, and much of the time it's just been another cool land that taps for colorless mana as well as for white mana. But in this moment it may see a little bit of a change in roles.
So Blahon knows that Lippy has Confiscation Coup, and I don't think he knows anything else. This attack would be 5 from Archangel Avacyn, +2, +2, that's 9, and then afterwards Archangel Avacyn is gonna transform for the final 3. So this would add up to be enough.
Yeah, no need for any additional plays from Lucas. And the transformation enough for Alessandro Lippi to scoop up his cards. We're going to be seeing a game 3 from these two.
Yeah, for me the story of that game was how the information that was gained by Todd Natsir very early on allowed Lucas Blahon to navigate his way around the cards that Lippi had in hand, pick the right threats, deploy them at the right time, and basically play around them all game. He won the game while Lippi still has Confiscation Coup in hand. He had been attacking, he had been reducing Lippi from 20 to 0 life with a bunch of, well, unassuming creatures mostly. And Lippi never really got a good opportunity to use his powerful blue card. So very nicely navigated by Lucas there.
And bear in mind that those two copies of Confiscation Coup both sideboarded in, and typically the cards that you sideboard in ought to be some of the cards that you most want to draw in a post-sideboard game. There we saw Lippy with both of them. One got taken by a Thought-Knot Seer, and the other one got sort of lost a large amount of its potency because it was able to be played around.
Yep. So now the players are looking back at sideboards once more. You can always change a couple things based on, well, for instance, the things you see from the opponent. Like, hey, there's Confiscation Coup. Maybe I want to board something a little bit differently then, although I don't really see what would really change. Perhaps Warping Whale, I guess, but that might be it. And you can also change a couple cards depending on who's on the play, who's on the draw. For this final game, Lippy will get to be on the play if he so desires. So that means that he might want to take a slightly more aggressive stance, perhaps add a land to the deck if he has one, and hopefully for him overwhelm Blohan before Blohan has a chance to set up with his powerful Eldrazi and Archangel Everson engine.
I'll tell you something, Frank, thinking about lands. I was very impressed with the amount of utility that Lucas Blohan got out of his lands in that game. We saw Spawning Bed combining with Shefet Dunes, each of them in the early to mid-game a good source of colourless mana. In the case of Shefet Dunes, a good source of colourless and white mana. But then when we hit the mid to late game, suddenly the Spawning Bed turned into 3 copies of Eldrazi Scion. The Dunes turned that into 3 2/2s attacking, along with the Archangel Avacyn, of course.
Yep.
And being able to get that kind of utility, it's obviously a different implementation. But to me, it's one of the reasons that Ramonap Red is so good as well, is that if you've got a monocolored deck that can make the most of these lands that are effectively also spells, then you get to have the best of both worlds. You've got enough mana to cast your spells, but then if you get flooded, you've got something to do with that mana.
It's a good point, and it's also a reason to play monocolor, because multicolor decks typically have to dedicate a large part of their land base towards dual lands to ensure that you have enough colored sources of both of your colors, or all 3 of your colors in case of Lippy. If you play monocolor, then you have a bit more flexibility in your land base, and you can include some of these colorless utility lands, which probably won Blohan the previous game, and yeah, it just helps against flooding.
Yeah, it's something I was talking to Reed Duke a little bit at the Pro Tour, and he said that so he had elected to go with a 3 or 4 color deck at the time, and he said that was kind of attractive because of the fact that it is quite easy at the moment to hit all of your colors of mana, because the quality of lands that produce multiple colors of mana is very, very high right now. But then he said that may have been a misevaluation of the format, because actually the opportunity cost of running a deck with that many colors was that he wasn't getting a chance to play with these spell lands.
Right. Well, looks like after a mulligan from Blohan, we can be underway again.
So he's kept on 6, scryed to the bottom, and sees a turn 1 Ether Hub from Alessandro Lippi. That will generate him his first point of energy, but passes things back. Nothing on turn 1 from Lucas Blohan. Not necessarily a huge surprise, not so many 1-drops in his list. Long Tusk Cub here coming from Lippi, though, and that one we know can get kind of out of hand if you let it just keep attacking for any great length of time. And that's the reason that we're going to see an early Spatial Contortion in order to kill it off.
Yeah, you definitely have to kill the Cub. When you're on the draw and you're playing against Steamer Energy and you don't have a blocker for it, just kill that Long Tusk Cub. It would get out of hand very quickly otherwise. Ooh, is that a Solemnity?
I think it may be. There's a Whirl of Virtuoso just played by Lippi. It does work out that it's still going to be kind of interesting. The Whirl of Virtuoso, in order to cast it, Lippi had to use both of the energy that he previously had from Ether Hub. So he's only got the 3 energy that he's currently been able to achieve thanks to Whirl of Virtuoso. That 3 energy stays.
Yep,
it's not going to
away. Yep.
But once Lippi spends it on making a Thopter token perhaps, or if he gets a Long Tusk Cub down or whatever, he's not going to be able to generate many more energy.
Indeed. And I think Lippi wisely decided that he'd rather sift the energy through his Ether hubs to be able to cast some cards rather than just make a top tier token. But yeah, this Solemnity is definitely going to be impactful here.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how the rest of this game goes, because I've not had very much chance to play with Solemnity just yet. Bristling Hydra, I mean, it's a Hydra, it's not really bristling.
Yeah, no energy to go with it, and no energy will ever be gained by Lippy ever again. So, wow, now this Bristling Hydra is just gonna trade for a Matter Reshaper.
He even had to spend a point of energy to cast the Bristling Hydra. And Magma Spray now meaning that that's another energy down. Alessandro Lippi, he's doing it the old-fashioned way here. He's still got a bunch of big creatures, but he has to just rely on their base stats, really, because they're all not really working with their primary purpose going.
It's a little silly, but Blohon had to take turn 3 off to cast Solemnity. He wasn't adding something like a creature to the board. It's still possible that random 4/3 for 4 mana beatdown is gonna do it this game, because Blohon is already down to 6. This is getting close.
It's going to have to be something good. There's a Thought-Knot Seer off the top for Lucas Blohon here. Passes things back. I smell an Archangel Avacyn.
I'm sure Lippy does too.
Magma Spray the pickup.
Magma Spray doesn't really do all that much, not against Archangel Avacyn. Yeah, I don't think Lippy can suicidally attack here. Oh, he does go for it.
I guess that it's the kind of, well, I'm in a rough spot. If I do attack here, I might just win.
Sure. Basically hoping that Blohon randomly has 6 or all lands in hand. You might have to hope for something when you are facing a Solemnity. And now Lippy doesn't have any energy remaining. So all of his cards are gonna be less effective. If he draws Harness Lightning, doesn't do anything. If he
draws Harness Lightning, he can't even cast it. He has no red mana.
Yeah.
Eldrazi Displacer coming down. Normally Eldrazi Displacer has to worry a little bit about flickering the likes of Whirler Virtuoso because it will generate energy on the way back in. Not so much right now.
Nope. Yeah, looks like Blohon has stabilized and is now gonna turn the corner with his flyers. He could even do some nice tricks between Eldrazi Displacer and Archangel Avacyn. You know, sacrifice the Selfless Spirit, then Archangel Avacyn is gonna transform in response to that, to the 3 damage trigger. Then blink your own Archangel Avacyn to give back indestructibility to your own Eldrazi Displacer. That used to be a powerful engine that we haven't really seen at the top tables in Standard for quite a while, but Blohon potentially assembles it here once again.
For now, I think he's just leaning on the fact that he's the only one with flyers on the board.
Yeah, that also works. Lungtus Cup. Yep, there we have a Grizzly Bear with no ability.
And here we see Eldrazi Displacer. It gets to flicker creatures, but those creatures come into play tapped. So essentially here, Lucas Blohon saying at the end of the turn, I'm going to tap down 2 of your creatures. Well, we suspected that Solemnity would be quite good in this matchup, and I think that it's possibly even better than we had hoped.
Blohon had to take turn 3 off, and he had to fall down to a low life total as a result. But this should be lethal now. Yep, Blohon can attack for 9 with all of his creatures after blinking the Lungtus Cup and then sacrificing the Selfless Spirit for the Archangel Avacyn transformation. They would do it.
Well, that is the end of our live match. We are going to have a little bit more magic for you soon enough. George Channing is joining Rich Hagen in the booth to talk through one of our Time Walk matches, so stay tuned to that. But first, these messages.